What are you doing? Tomatoes, sausages, nice crispy bacon. We saved some for you, Mr. Frodo. Put it out, you fools, put it out. What in the name of... Frodo began, scrambling to his feet in alarm. Just preparing a proper meal for once, Merry explained cheerfully, turning sizzling sausages in a small pan. Tomatoes, bacon, and the last of the sausages. Sam's been saving them. We set some aside for you, Sam added, his round face brightening. You've hardly eaten all day, Mr. Frodo. Extinguish it, Frodo cried, lunging towards the fire. Put it out immediately. These two versions of the same sequence, one from Peter Jackson's film adaptation of The Fellowship of the Ring, the other from Ian Chesterfield's novelization, offer a compelling lens through which to examine the differences between film and prose. In Jackson's film, the exchange between the hobbits is quick, funny, and charged with sudden tension. In the novelization, however, the sequence is expanded with internal beats, descriptive texture, and small narrative flourishes that layer the scene. These differences reflect the strengths and constraints of each medium. Film is faster because the images come to us through direct perception. Prose, however, must use words, which are symbols, concepts that must be translated via the process of thought, and so the emotional beats must be constructed more deliberately, using language alone. To further explore these differences, this video will look at one part of the story in both the film and the novelization of The Fellowship of the Ring. First, we'll watch a short clip from the film. Then, we'll read the matching chapter from the novelization. Since films move quickly and can show a lot in just a few minutes, while novels often take pages to describe the same events, we'll break the novelization chapters into short passages. After each passage, we'll stop to talk about what works well in the novel, what might be stronger in the film, and how each version tells the story in its own way. We'll go back and forth like this until we've worked through the whole chapter. At the end, we'll wrap everything up by thinking about what each medium does best, where they might struggle, and how comparing them helps us understand the story in a new way. By the time we're finished, we'll have a much clearer idea of how storytelling changes when it moves from screen to page, and why that matters. Let's begin.
This was the great watchtower of Amon Sûl. We shall rest here tonight. These are for you. Oh! Keep them close. I'm going to have a look around. Shing! Stay here. Let's have some tomatoes first. Can I have some gravy? Okay. Some more tomatoes, Sam? What are you doing? Tomatoes, sausages, nice crispy bacon. We saved some for you, Mr. Frodo. Put it out, you fools! Put it out! Oh, that's nice. Ash on my tomatoes. Shing! Go! Shing! 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 Back, you devils! Oh! I see. Frodo! Strider! Help him, Strider! He's been stabbed by a morgul blade. This is beyond my skill to heal. He needs elvish medicine. Hurry! We're 6 days from Rivendell. I'll never make it. Hold on, Frodo. Gandalf!
Next, we'll read the first passage from the chapter of the novelization, and then compare and analyze the differences. Dawn revealed the stark silhouettes of the weather hills against a pearl-grey sky. Strider led the hobbits across terrain that grew increasingly rugged, the gentle rolling landscapes giving way to rocky outcroppings and steep inclines. Despite their exhaustion, the hobbits pressed on, drawing strength from the ranger's seemingly inexhaustible endurance. As afternoon light began to fade, Strider halted before a tall hill crowned with ancient ruins. Broken stone walls and crumbled arches stood silhouetted against the darkening sky like a skeleton of some great beast. "Behold the watchtower of Amon Sûl," Strider announced, a note of reverence in his voice. "In the days of the kingdom of Arnor, this was a place of vigilance and strength. We shall rest here tonight." The hobbits gazed up at the weathered remains with a mixture of awe and apprehension. There was something both majestic and unsettling about the ruins, a reminder of glories long past and the inevitable decay that followed. They made their way up the steep hillside, finding shelter in a small hollow part way up the slope. Frodo, Merry, and Pippin collapsed onto the ground, muscles trembling with exhaustion. Sam lowered himself more carefully, immediately concerned with unpacking what remained of their provisions. Without warning, Strider tossed 4 small bundles wrapped in cloth towards the hobbits. The unexpected gesture startled them from their fatigue. "Arm yourselves," the ranger instructed, as the hobbits unwrapped the bundles to reveal short swords, appropriately sized for their small stature. The blades gleamed dully in the fading light.
I must scout the area. Stay here and remain vigilant. These hills hide many dangers.
With that, he melted into the gathering darkness, leaving the hobbits alone with their new weapons and growing unease.
This opening passage from the novelization showcases many of the written medium's strengths, especially in how it invites intimacy with the characters and infuses the landscape with layered meaning. Unlike film, which can instantly dazzle with visuals, prose builds its world more gradually, constructing atmosphere not only through imagery, but through the emotional and psychological filters of the characters. However, prose also has limitations that film does not. It cannot immediately show us the ruins of Amon Sûl in their total visual splendor. It must describe them, and in doing so, risks flattening the awe into something less visceral. The phrase, quote, skeleton of some great beast, end quote, is vivid, but it must substitute for the film's ability to present a wide shot, to let us feel the scale and texture of the stone through light and shadow. Likewise, the tension of nightfall, the dangers lurking in the hills, and the growing unease of the hobbits are all described, rather than felt through ambient sound or performance. Another subtle weakness is that prose can risk over-explaining or under-dramatizing physical action. The arrival at the hilltop, the issuing of weapons, and Strider's departure are all rendered with narrative control, but they may feel less immediate or kinetic than they did on screen. Still, what prose offers is a sense of time and consciousness that film struggles to match. The passage doesn't just recount what happens, it quietly conveys how it feels, how the ruins speak of loss, how exhaustion colors perception, how even a silent sword can carry dread. In that, prose excels, not as a replacement for film, but as a medium that breathes differently, drawing the reader not only into a scene, but into its memory, its symbolism, and its silences. Let's continue.
Frodo awoke with a start, unsure what had disturbed his exhausted slumber. A tantalizing aroma filled the small hollow, the unmistakable smell of cooking meat. He blinked away sleep to find the hollow illuminated by the orange glow of a small fire, over which Sam, Merry, and Pippin huddled eagerly. "What in the name of—" Frodo began, scrambling to his feet in alarm. "Just preparing a proper meal for once," Merry explained cheerfully, turning sizzling sausages in a small pan. "Tomatoes, bacon, and the last of the sausages. Sam's been saving them. We set some aside for you," Sam added, his round face brightening. "You've hardly eaten all day, Mr. Frodo." "Extinguish it!" Frodo cried, lunging toward the fire. "Put it out immediately!" With desperate kicks, he scattered the burning wood and sent a shower of dirt onto the pan, smothering the flames and ruining the food. "Now that's hardly necessary," Pippin protested, staring forlornly at his ash-covered meal. "A bit of soil doesn't improve the flavour, you know." The words had barely left his lips when a chilling sound split the night. A high, piercing shriek that seemed to freeze the blood in their veins. It was answered by another, then another, echoing around the hillside. "They found us," Frodo whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for the ring beneath his shirt. Through the darkness below, they could make out 5 shadow figures scaling the hill with unnatural speed, moving more like predatory beasts than men. "Run!" Frodo shouted, grabbing his sword and scrambling toward the summit. "To the top!" The 4 hobbits clambered upward in desperate haste, their short legs pumping furiously as they climbed toward the ruined watchtower. Behind them, the shrieking grew louder, seeming to come from all directions at once. They reached the summit and found themselves in a ring of broken stone columns, all that remained of the once proud tower of Amon Sûl. Back to back they stood in the centre of the ruins, swords trembling in their inexperienced hands as they faced outward toward the encroaching darkness. One by one they appeared, 5 towering figures in black robes, materializing like physical manifestations of the night itself. Their faces remained hidden in the depths of their hoods, but their presence radiated malice and hunger. In their gauntleted hands they carried long, cruel swords that gleamed with an unnatural light. The tallest among them stepped forward, their leader, more terrible than the others. Something about his movement, the way the very air seemed to recoil from his presence, marked him as ancient and powerful in his evil. "Stay back!" Sam shouted, his voice cracking with fear even as he stepped protectively in front of Frodo. With unexpected courage, the gardener charged forward, swinging his small blade at the towering figure. The Witch King parried the strike effortlessly. Sam's blade shattered against the dark sword, fragments scattering across the stone floor like drops of silver. With contemptuous ease, the wraith struck Sam with a mailed fist, sending him flying backwards. Terror overwhelmed Merry and Pippin. Despite their best intentions, they found themselves dropping to the ground, paralyzed by a fear beyond anything they had ever known. Frodo stood alone before the advancing shadows. A whispering began in his mind, seductive, insistent voices promising safety, if only he would use what he carried. He staggered backward, fighting against the compulsion, but his resistance weakened with each step. His trembling hand slipped into his pocket, fingers closing around the cold metal of the ring. A surge of excitement emanated from the black figures as they sensed his surrender to temptation. "No, Frodo!" Sam cried, struggling to rise, but his warning came too late. Unable to resist any longer, Frodo slipped the ring onto his finger and vanished from sight. This passage demonstrates some of the most compelling advantages prose offers when depicting suspense, psychological tension, and supernatural horror, elements that can be difficult to sustain with the same texture and intimacy in film. The scene, drawn from the attack on Weathertop, builds incrementally from the warmth and false security of a firelit meal to the icy dread of the Nazgul assault. That tonal shift, from domestic comedy to primal fear, is executed with control and contrast that prose handles particularly well. In the written medium, we begin in a moment of disarming normalcy. The hobbits cooking sausages, engaging in friendly banter. The sensory details, the, quote, sizzling sausages, the orange glow of a small fire, end quote, appeal to comfort and familiarity, lulling both reader and characters into a sense of momentary peace. Then, in a single sentence, quote, "Extinguish it," Frodo cried, end quote, the mood pivots, and the consequences of their carelessness become apparent. Prose excels at capturing this kind of shift because it can juxtapose tones without relying on visual or auditory cues. What might require music, lighting changes, or cuts in film happens here via language alone, and the result is a more subtle, creeping dread. Still, prose has its limits. The kinetic intensity of the fight, the clash of blades, the blow that sends Sam flying, relies on language to simulate action, which often lacks the visceral immediacy of a well-edited film sequence. Descriptions like, quote, "with contemptuous ease," or "fragments scattering across the stone floor," end quote, do a good job of conveying momentum, but they are processed cognitively rather than felt viscerally. In the film, the sudden strike, the sound of metal shattering, Sam's body hitting the ground, all of these land with physical force. Prose can describe the events, but it requires the reader's imaginative effort to simulate the sensory impact. Let's continue. The world around Frodo transformed instantly. colour and substance drained away, leaving everything in ghostly shades of grey and blue. But the ringwraiths, previously mere shadows, now stood revealed in their true form. No longer black riders, but pale spectral kings with ancient haggard faces and eyes filled with endless hunger. White hair streamed from their heads, and their gaunt hands reached toward him with terrible purpose. The leader, the Witch King of Angmar, extended a withered hand toward Frodo, drawn inexorably to the ring that now blazed like a beacon in this twilight world. Frodo felt his own hand rising against his will, pulled by the ring's desire to return to its masters. As Frodo sank to his knees, unable to resist the ring's betrayal, the Witch King lunged forward. A wicked dagger flashed in his hand, plunging deep into Frodo's left shoulder. Pain unlike anything he had ever known coursed through his body. Not merely physical agony, but a cold spiritual venom that seemed to reach for his very soul. Through a haze of torment, Frodo glimpsed a figure leaping into the fray. Strider, wielding sword and torch, moving through the wraiths like a dancer of flame. With the last of his strength, Frodo pulled the ring from his finger, collapsing back into the material world with a cry of pain. "Frodo!" Sam was instantly at his side, cradling his head as the battle raged around them. Strider fought with astonishing skill, his blade flashing silver in the darkness as he drove the wraiths back. He thrust his torch into the face of one, setting its black robes ablaze. The creature emitted a piercing shriek as it fled, trailing flames like a comet across the night sky. One by one, the wraiths retreated before Strider's onslaught of steel and fire, their inhuman screams echoing across the hilltop until they vanished into the darkness below. "Mr. Frodo!" Sam's panicked voice cut through the sudden silence. "He's hurt bad." Strider knelt beside the fallen hobbit, his face grim as he examined the wound. On the ground nearby lay the Witch King's dagger, its blade thin and cruel. As they watched, the metal began to smoke and dissolve, vanishing into the air like morning mist. "It's beyond my skill to heal," Strider said, discarding the metal hilt with disgust. "He's been stabbed with a Morgul blade." "Then do something," Sam pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Anything." "He needs elvish medicine now," Strider replied, gathering Frodo into his arms, "or all will be lost." The ranger lifted Frodo onto his back with surprising gentleness. "Light torches," he commanded the other hobbits. "The ringwraiths fear fire. It may keep them at bay." Through the darkness they ran, 4 small flames bobbing through the night, as Strider set a punishing pace across the rugged countryside. Frodo hung limply across his shoulders, occasionally murmuring incoherently as the poison spread through his system. "We're 6 days from Rivendell," Sam panted, struggling to keep pace. "He'll never make it." "He must," Strider answered grimly. "Hold on, Frodo." Through the darkness of pain and encroaching shadow, Frodo felt himself slipping away. With the last of his consciousness, he called out for the one person he believed might still save him. "Gandalf!"
This closing stretch of the Weathertop sequence in prose highlights many of the written medium's most profound assets. Its power to render interior states with precision, its command of tone and atmosphere, and its ability to shift seamlessly between the mythic and the personal. The transformation of Frodo's perception upon wearing the ring, quote, "colour and substance drained away, ghostly shades of grey and blue," end quote, is something the film attempted visually through desaturation, lens distortion, and digital effects. But prose has the advantage of naming meaning, not just showing sensation. The ringwraiths are no longer cloaked mysteries, but revealed as, quote, "pale spectral kings with eyes filled with endless hunger," End quote. Frodo isn't just seeing differently, he's perceiving the metaphysical underlayer of the world, and that's something prose conveys with clarity and elegance. The stabbing itself is another moment where prose demonstrates its edge in psychological immediacy. Quote, not merely physical agony, but a cold spiritual venom that seemed to reach for his very soul. End quote. This phrase is not something easily visualized. The film attempted by having Frodo writhing in pain, but prose tells us exactly what kind of pain. Existential, invasive, unnatural. And it's precisely because prose gives us access to Frodo's inner experience that the wound becomes more than just a plot point. In contrast, the action sequence that follows, Strider battling the Wraiths, is vigorous and well-paced in the prose, but here is where film typically gains the upper hand. Visual media thrives on kinetic energy, choreography, and spectacle. And while the image of, quote, setting its black robes ablaze, or a wraith trailing flames like a comet, end quote, is vivid on the page, the film delivered this moment with greater visceral impact. Prose action must walk a fine line between clarity and excitement, and while this passage handles it deftly, it still requires the reader to imagine the rhythm and momentum that film can simply show. In summary, this chapter from the novelization showcases prose at its richest, capable of revealing spiritual conflict, charting emotional nuance, and building mythic weight without sacrificing character intimacy. While film might excel in bringing the terror and action of the moment to life visually, prose lingers in the quiet devastation, the dread, the fleeting hopes, and the whispered names in the dark. And it's in that final whisper, quote, Gandalf, end quote, that the written word claims its deepest power. Thank you for watching this comparative analysis. Next time, we'll be comparing the scene where Arwen rescues Frodo with the corresponding chapter in the novelization and analyzing the differences. Take care, and if you're listening to this, please send help.